me and the slavery. So brother Trevor, he came on and he said, well, it's two things I hear. And Trevor, you can correct me if I misrepresented anything that you said or were trying to convey. The first thing he said, brother Ankh, is, the homie people fought to keep the transatlantic slave going when the crown tried to stop it. They wanted to keep it going. And so I just want you to address that point first, brother Ankh, and then I'm going to move into his second point. We can move into a second point, which was, well, I don't think that the homie people cared what happened to Africans after they sold them, because once they sold them, they didn't come check on us, and they had the ships, they had the means to come over here and check on us. So could you talk about those 2 points, brother Ankh?
I think, and how you two ladies doing? Dr. Miata and what's the sister name?
Sister Constance.
I'll be honest, I don't really care about these 2 points. I'm gonna let it play. I'm gonna let that conversation happen, but I don't really care about these 2 points that much. But just want to say that though.
Sister Constance.
Sister Constance, how you doing? How you feeling?
Hello. Good, great.
And brother Trevor, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So you can have a fact, but take it completely out of context. So, and which is crazy work right there. And that's something you should never do. So historically, maybe they wanted to keep it going because at that point, it's the only game in town. It's the only business. And I can understand that. But the whole context of it was they was involved in a global network of slavery. It is what it is. Like at that point, ain't no choice. Okay, point blank. The extraordinarily crazy claim you made was they didn't care about where we went and didn't come get us is ridiculous. Like they had world maps, like they even remotely knew where we was going at to go get anybody. It's crazy to me. So they was a continental people. They wasn't a global people at that time. The Europeans had gotten global based off of the sale, based off of certain technology, based off certain maps. So to expect anybody, any African nation to go get somebody is the most ridiculous thing. It's borderline hating at the end of the day. That means you really don't care about making sure facts are in proper context. Like, that's crazy. That's like saying, somebody got locked up, we ain't gonna break them out of prison. Like, really? Somewhere with the feds, somewhere way over there, you don't even know where they at. It's too much to ask out of that. If you sat down with yourself and thought about that and put everything together, you would recognize that they didn't know where they was taking us at, bro. They just didn't. And all they knew was the Portuguese, based off of the work. Where's that work at?
I got it. Right here. I got it.
Based off
the Portuguese in West Africa, 1415 to 1670. Hold on, let me get my Google. Nah. 1415 to 1670. All right, that's the book. The Portuguese in West Africa, 1415 to 1670. They're going to say the author's name, or I have it here. Hold on, let me see. Let me pull it up. So Malin Newitt is the author or the editor. Malin Newitt. That's the person who edited this book, and it's supposed to be logs from the Portuguese. So let me let them finish talking, but please hit that like button.
This work, the Africans kind of beat them down and made them plug into their markets. Right now, we got to talk about what was slavery in African markets, which is a whole different thing. So that, those African nations didn't have a penal system. They didn't have jails. Whether we want to believe it or not, African people have committed crimes in their community since the beginning, like all people are. And so there was no place to put them. They had wars, like nations, like Germany and Japan. We had wars too. We were illiterate war people at times. What we need to do, we had empires, all that. So we had a market, right, that had commerce, trade, slavery, and all that. So that's not a big deal. They made the Portuguese tap into that after the Portuguese tried to use unsuccessful trade raiding based off of the defense of these different, they defended their nation like they're supposed to. They had a navy, they had all these things in tow. They had a riverboat system, okay? They had all that. So you kind of like acting like they just a bunch of dumb idiots and just wouldn't come get us. And that's just ridiculous, man. Like, you gotta stop. You can't do that.
Never mind.
I want to know, like, okay, so say the homie got on a boat and they came to America to come get us. What would have happened to them? They'd been able to check on us and say, "Okay, y'all good? We can go back home." Like, whoa,
right? Like, yeah. What was the outcome?
No, I get it. Yeah. So my point in saying that the Dahomey tribe, I don't think, because that was a counterpoint to a point that Dr. Mott made about the Dahomey tribe potentially not knowing the fate of the people that they were selling. And my counterpoint to that was that I believe that the Dahomey did not care about the ultimate end, the ultimate destination for the people that they were selling. That's evidenced by not wanting to cooperate once they found out that the transatlantic slave trade was outlawed. They didn't want to cooperate. In fact, they circumvented any protections that were put in place to make sure that the transatlantic slave trade didn't continue.
So I would say that in the beginning, they may not have understood what they were selling the prisoners of war into, selling the indentured servants into. They may not have known what they were selling into, but over time, I believe they did understand what they were into, what they were feeding into, what they were helping to exist over time, and then going to them wanting to keep their economy going via slavery. So, or at that time, via slavery, via the transatlantic slave trade, being able to feed into the transatlantic slave trade. But I think, in my opinion, from what I've read, the Dahomey, like others, in the beginning, no, they didn't understand. But as time went on, yeah, they understood. So by the time it was known for what it was already too late. Exactly.
There was a book written by a white person. I know you guys said earlier in the podcast that these British people and these Europeans documented very well. There was a book written by a British slave trader called, his name was Robert Norris. It was written in like 1789, Memoirs of the Reign of one of the Kings of Dahomey, where he said that the Dahomey kingdom wasn't chaotic or primitive. It was structured and state capable. And then in fact, if the captives who they mainly got by war and conquest weren't sold in the Atlantic slave trade, they would be killed or sacrificed. So that's my belief, that the Dahomey didn't care about what happened to these people that they sold, that they captured first by conquest and then sold to these people for whatever material gain or monetary gain that they were able to benefit from.
Yeah, we never talked about whether people cared or didn't care. That was something that you came into, you talked about that. We were comparing and we were actually juxtaposing African slavery and European slavery. We never went into because what they.
Are you saying that slavery
I never said that. Let me say what I said. I put up this book right here, Slavery and African Ethnicities in the Americas. And I talked about, and you can go back to
I'm personally not getting into whether they cared or not. Because it really doesn't matter whether they cared or not. The outcome is the outcome, whether they cared about it or not. The outcome is still the same. So I'm not focusing on whether the Oyo cared about what happened to the indentured servants that they sold off into the transatlantic slave trade. I'm not focusing on that. Once again, it doesn't matter if they cared or if they didn't care. People were still sold off into slavery and their whole lives changed. So it doesn't matter if they cared or didn't care.
The tape, like you can roll it back. But I talked about what they thought African slavery was, and it wasn't really a system of slavery. It really was a system of incorporation, and I broke all of that down. So we already kind of addressed that. But Trevor, it's kind of like you I don't know. Could I ask you a question, Trevor? What is your ethnicity?
I'm Black American.
Oh, you Black American. Okay. Yeah. And in the chat, you put this right here. You said, knowing the history of the world isn't Eurocentric. Who made that claim? It's kind of like you trying to like, you want to, who made that claim? Like who
I'll
said that?
Tell you. Yeah, I'll answer your question. Sure. So the claim was that people who point out the history that is very well documented, that these African kingdoms willingly sold Africans into slavery. People that point that out is somehow brainwashed or taking white people's talking points. That's ridiculous. I don't need a white person. In fact, some of the most prominent historians that I listen to are Black. I don't even know a white historian who even delves into the topics that I'm interested in. So I think it's just I disagree with that.
Okay, so I know Sister Constance made that statement. Sister Constance, could you talk to him about what you meant by that?
So what I was saying is that we have to stop adopting these talking points of Europeans in how we have division amongst Black people in general across the diaspora. That's what I'm saying. So I don't remember the other part that he was talking about, but that was early on.
Yeah, we talked about that early on, Trevor. So I was just trying to.
But I don't think European history or acknowledging European history is in any way wrong. I'm saying when you try to water down a Black African experience by comparing the two, it's totally two different things. And that's what you try to do when you compare Africans selling slaves to what happened when we got over here. Those are two different things. And so when you try to compare the two to try to water down the experience of Africans when they were in America, I think that's where there's a miss for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna say two things. I've never had or heard or even thought that any African scholar inferred the idea that knowing the history of the world is through a Eurocentric lens. Dr. John Henry Clarke stresses to study everything. I say it all the time, I echo it all the time. Dr. Clarke and all of our scholars are always preaching that we not only study African history, but we study the history of the world. So I'm not sure about that, about the idea and the claim and things and everything that goes around that. But I will say our scholars have always emphasized studying everything. Study African history, study European history, study American history, study Indian history, study Chinese history, Japanese history, study the history of the world. That's how you put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I will also say, start reading books and start reading studies and primary sources. Documentaries are not considered primary sources. You can't take documentaries to the bank. Start reading books and then look at, go to the appendix and everything in the back of the book and check the sources, and reading studies and reading primary sources and reading like we got to read. That's the old school research. Pretend like computers don't exist. Go to the library, like do some real. When you do that real research, that's how you're gonna get to the root of it, because you're gonna have to do some real reading. You can come across like one of the books that they presented about the documents directly from the Portuguese, telling them about their experience. So read. You can't take documentaries to the bank. You can't.
Not the same.
I don't think they're two different things. They were both a part of the same system. The selling, you wouldn't have the Africans in America if you didn't have someone selling them in the first place. It's part of one continuous.
Again, we're talking about prisoners of war. We're talking about.
If I could just finish, it's one continuum. So there was a continuous process, right? The same thing for any transaction. There isn't any supply if there's no demand, right? And so it's not too different. It's one and the same.
No, they're not, Trevor.
Can I address?
Go, brother Unc. You want to address them? Go ahead.
So, no scholar that you have would say that the slavery that occurred in Africa was the same as chattel slavery. There's a reason for the word chattel slavery, bro. And either you just want to do it on purpose or trying to sound smarter than everybody else for no apparent reason. Like, I agree to your initial points. I just said the way you introduced it wasn't like it actually occurred. Okay, like you don't know what was on their minds or what they cared about. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy to say they didn't care about us, they didn't come get us. Like, you should know, since you claim to read scholarly works, that's not even part of the discussion on whether they cared or what they was thinking, or was it.
Don't be afraid to read, brother. Just read. Trust me. Read. Go read some books. Everything that they said in the documentary, go read it. Go look it up. Everything, write down everything in the documentary, and then go do your own research on it. And if you come back with the same information, the documentary did good. If not, then it lied to you. You still got to check your sources. So because it's in the documentary, that means you take it to the bank. You know better than Trevor. You know different than Trevor on the screen. That means anybody can tell you anything in documentary style and you believe it. Are you going to verify what you saw in the documentary? Because you still need to do that. Look, we cannot be allergic or afraid to read. Our ancestors used to die to read. Now we don't. Now we rather die than read. Just read. Everything in the documentary, just all you got to do is look it up. And anybody can put anything in a documentary. But guess what? You can verify both sources. All you got to do is do more research. Don't be allergic to research.
Business, but no scholar actually says that the transcontinental global trade was the same thing as, quote unquote, the slavery that occurred in the African slave markets. Different rules, different regulations. First of all, you wasn't a slave for the rest of your damn life, and your kids wasn't enslaved for the rest of their life, and they kids, and they kids, and they kids, and they kids. That's a distinct difference right there. I'll say it again for those who are just very slow and playing around with us. I'm saying that Europeans would enslave your mother and your father. Their kids would be slaves. Their kids' kids would be slaves for daggone 400 years. Go get me the record of that being in Africa. I'll just stand on that point alone.
We talked about that earlier. We talked about that earlier. Like, I brought up, I actually showed this book right here by Dr. Gwendolyn Hall, and broke down that whole idea. So I don't, he's trying to say it's the same thing.
It's not the same. It's not the same as prisoners of war. That's totally different.
Listen, I'm not a slave denial. Hold on. Let me speak, bro. That's how
go ahead, bro. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Now let me talk, right? So you playing. That is not the same thing. Now, I would agree that slavery of anybody is just wrong. So I'm not sitting there saying that was right or wrong. So my question to you is, what do you do with the criminals if you don't have a penal system? Europeans had penal system, meaning if you committed a crime, they could just lock you up. So I'm gonna ask you, what should I do with my prisoners of war and my criminals? If I'm in Africa, if I'm understanding African culture, custom, and traditions, and the way they handle that, I'm asking you, what would you do, Mr. Trevor?
Yeah. So I think what a lot of people misunderstand about the Dahomey, they were very intentional in their participation when it came to their participation in the transatlantic slave trade. A lot of the quote unquote wars that they initiated was in order to capture people to keep their economy running on the selling of enslaved people. So it wasn't just a war where they had a disagreement about something and people just
I apologize, Trevor. I was just talking about African slavery in general. I'm not going to stay on the Dahomey. I'm just talking about slavery, and that there was slavery.
We're talking about the transatlantic slave trade.
Okay, but I'm talking.
But if you're talking about the transatlantic slave trade, you're literally boiling the transatlantic slave trade that happened in Africa down to 2 tribes, and just saying and making it seem like these 2 were the hub of the African or the transatlantic slave trade that kicked everything off. And you're talking about like West Africa is a vast area of West Africa. So he's not talking about the transatlantic slave trade. He's talking about the Dahomey or the Dahomey and Oyo involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. He's not talking about the transatlantic slave trade as a whole. Dr. Ma'at, Brother Ankh, and Sister Constance are talking about the transatlantic slave trade as a whole versus indentured servitude. Trevor is talking about the role of the Oyo and the Dahomey specifically, basically. So they argue 2 different things.
Okay, so if we're talking about the transcontinental slave trade, then why just stay stuck on the Dahomey? We're talking about, generally speaking, like, hold on, I want to make sure, because you kind of like
you're cutting me off, first of all, and
no, I didn't know, because I was trying to let you know that I'm talking about the transcontinental slave trade.
Okay, so am I.
African nation. Okay,
so just let me finish. So the Dahomey kingdom was one of the biggest players in the transatlantic slave trade. Anyone that has done a modicum of research on the transatlantic slave trade in West Africa's involvement knows this.
Nobody's denying that.
And my point was that, man, I don't cut people off, man. It's kind of rude to cut me off. I mean,
you don't have a point. You being circular. You just saying the same. He's just saying the same thing over and over and over and over. Everybody's acknowledged the role of the Dahomey. Everybody's acknowledged the role of the Oyo. We know. Once again, no serious scholar, no serious African scholar denies the role that kingdoms like the Dahomey and the Oyo played in the transatlantic slave trade. No serious scholar would deny that. So he's being circular right now. So in
the middle of a sentence, now I can't even go ahead, man. You got it.
No, go ahead. Rethink your thoughts, brother. I just wanted to. Okay, I apologize for cutting you off. Go ahead, brother. Catch it. You can catch your thoughts. If it was that serious, you ain't forget about it. Go ahead.
Nah, man. You go ahead, man.
When you catch your thought, you can cut me off. That way we even up. So my point is, I'm not just talking about the Dahomey, whether they the largest players or not. Okay, we can talk about the Nzinga, King Afonso. They was the first players. You ain't get much bigger than them.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead, brother.
So basically, these wars that were started by a lot of these kingdoms that benefited economically from selling and trading enslaved people, they were started with the intention to capture and trade people. They weren't started for disagreements between a chieftain selling his daughter but not receiving however much the dowry. It wasn't for those types of things. They were intentionally doing it in order to continue to be active in the transatlantic slave trade.
Hold on, let me say that again.
I would like. Hold on. So my point is, I'm not just talking about the Dahomey, whether they the largest players or not. Okay, we can talk about the Nzinga, King Afonso. They was the first players. You ain't get much bigger than them.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead, brother.
So basically, these wars that were started by a lot of these kingdoms that benefited economically from selling and trading enslaved people, they were started with the intention to capture and trade people. They weren't started for disagreements between a chieftain selling his daughter but not receiving however much the dowry. It wasn't for those types of things. They were intentionally doing it in order to continue to be active in the transatlantic slave trade.
But let's put some context. Are you talking about at the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, or what time frame in the transatlantic slave trade are you talking now? Because from what I'm hearing, he's talking about a time later on as the transatlantic slave trade grew, and you got other African nations, or if we want to continue to use the Dahomey or the Oyo, they realize the part that they can play, and they realize the economics that they can, how they could benefit economically rather. And then yes, they started doing those things, but it almost seems like he's framing it as this is the beginning. This is how indentured servitude started in Africa, when indentured servitude existed well before Europe was even anything.